Um, so welcome everyone. It's wonderful Friday afternoon to Fraktio and to listen to me. The title of my talk is the GDPR and how to be one of the good guys. You can, if you have your laptops or you care to follow on your own, the slides are online, freely available as well. First, a couple of words about me. I was invited by your colleague, I believe he goes by Limis, who in very supportive fashion is not yet here, but promised to be on his way. And I run the project MyData 2018. We're an international conference on personal data. We're running the third time this year, and we're the flagship events for the MyData movement, which is a global network of people, organizations, and businesses who work in the personal data ecosystem. But I'll talk a little bit more about the sort of ideology of MyData a bit later. So I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to tell you what will and what won't get you fined stupid amounts of money. I'm also not a coder, so I'm not going to tell you how to technically implement specific things. What I am is a philosopher. So what I'm going to be doing is talking about ideas, as what as philosophers do, and hopefully to help you kind of reframe the way you think about the GDPR in terms of being a good guy. So why are we here? GDPR is coming, just over a month, and everyone and everything will have to be compliant. And everything that gets built after May 25th obviously has to be from the ground up built to comply with the new regulation that's coming in. And also, we want to do good stuff. We want to be good people, help others do good things. And the use of the Facebook thumbs up is consciously ironic there. So what I'll do today is say a couple of words about personal data, then about what it means to be a good guy. I'll hopefully breeze through the GDPR bits, just to point out a couple of, it's a huge piece of legislation, obviously. I'm not going to take you through the whole thing. I'm just going to point to a couple of sort of salient points that are kind of actionable on the good guy kind of radar. Then I'm going to talk about MyData and how sort of combining those two things, GDPR and MyData, can help you and your clients be the good guys in your and their respective industries. So personal data, first of all, it's everywhere. If you think about yourselves, from the second you're born and even before, you're measured, your growth is logged somewhere, you hit school, your grades are kept, you move from place to place, you consume energy, you download apps, you buy anything. Your data is in today's world, it's absolutely everywhere. And this is why the GDPR is important, because it deals with personal data and you can't get away from it. So from a business point of view, personal data is also everywhere. It has to be taken into account when we're talking about user experience or relationship management, system security, interoperability, all these different aspects of running a digital business in today's world. So the GDPR is not kind of a thing you can do apart from everything else you do, because everything you do has to do with personal data as well. So it has to be taken as a sort of comprehensive thing. And personal data is becoming this new economic asset class. And that's why you're going to see a lot of new services, platforms, software companies popping up who are going to, whose main sort of resource that they deal with is personal data. So in that sense as well, you're going to be helping a lot of people who deal sort of explicitly with personal data and put it to good use, hopefully good use. So the estimated value in Europe in 2020 annually from digital identity applications is €1 trillion and more. So there's a huge potential in personal data for businesses. And the Boston Consulting Group has said that nearly half of the potential value generation of this €1 trillion is at risk if a trusted flow of data is not established. Yet, nearly 80% of consumers say that it's hard to trust companies with your personal data. I'm sure we all feel it as people who consume products and services that deal with personal data. It's not always easy to say, I completely trust this and this service. So we live in a world where we don't really trust the people who deal with our personal data. Yet there's this huge business potential for using personal data. So we believe that the solution to this kind of contradiction is interoperability and new practices, i.e. being a good guy. So what do I mean when I talk about being a good guy? This is one way to go about it. Being trustworthy seems to be kind of at the core of what companies and us, we should be doing in order to be perceived as the good guys in our industry. Like it was evident from before, nearly 80% of consumers at the moment don't trust their service providers. So it's a huge asset for anyone and any company to actually be perceived as and to be trustworthy. So some examples of trustworthiness and sort of a basic analogy with a phone. So you should ask for permission before you do stuff. You know, you don't just grab a phone from your friend's hand. You should probably explain clearly what you mean by doing stuff. So you say, my battery's out, I need to call my partner, I'm hanging out with you tonight. You give them a fair chance of saying no. You don't threaten to stop being friends unless you can borrow this phone. It's one time. You give them a chance to say yes to some stuff and not to other stuff. So yeah, here's my phone, you can call your partner, but please don't go into my other apps while using my phone. You should also make it easy for people to change their minds about stuff they already said yes to. So you found out this call is going to be international, so no, please don't do that. Send a text instead. That's being a good guy. Make it also simple for people to ask for their stuff back. So don't run away with the phone and leave your friend stranded with no way to contact you. And when asked, give that stuff back. And finally, give it back in a way and in a condition that they can actually use it again. So don't set the phone language to something incomprehensible to most of us before giving it back. So this is what I mean when I talk about being trustworthy and being a good guy. So how does the GDPR fit into all this? So I'll focus, like I said, it's a huge piece of legislation. Not going to cover all of it, but I will look at 3 things. So one is in the principles section, I'll look at consent. Second, in the rights of the data subject, we'll have a look at the right to data portability. And third, from the controller and processor's point of view, we'll look at data protection by design and by default. So these are sort of prime areas where when you have to make changes anyway, you have a chance to make really good changes and not just minimally comply with the letter of the law. So consent should be clearly distinguishable from other matters, should be intelligible and easily accessible in form, and in clear and plain language. And it should be made as easy to withdraw and as to give consent. So this is what it means. So giving consent is this permission to do stuff. An easily accessible form, something that's sort of big and flashy and not hidden deep in the settings or somewhere where you have to know a specific URL to get to this location. Intelligible form basically means that people should realize where they're being taken when they click on this big flashing button. And this permission stuff should not be bundled on the same page with a bunch of other stuff that is just confusing and hard to find. And also that big button that takes you to giving your consent, it shouldn't disappear once that consent is given. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about consent. Data portability is the right to receive the personal data concerning a person in a structured, commonly used and machine-readable format. And it should be a sort of possible, where technically feasible, to transmit this data from one controller to another. So what this means, or what this is all about, is being able to basically move your stuff from one place to another place. Your S-group shopping data, you should be able to take it over to Kesko and vice versa. You have the right to receive this personal data. So that's just sort of, you need to be able to get your stuff from the organization holding it. The structured, commonly used machine-readable format basically means that because beforehand it was possible for someone to, yes, give you your data, but basically send you a bunch of printed PDFs, which are just useless, and no one can actually do anything with those. So this new or revised legislation stipulates specifically that the format in which your data comes back should be structured, commonly used, and machine-readable. And this technically feasible bit refers to basically building tools that play nice with other people's tools. Instead of having these silos of data locked in proprietary formats, building interoperability. And third, data protection by design and by default. Basically says that you should design stuff to implement data protection principles from the start. And by default, only personal data, which are necessary for each specific purpose of the processing, are processed. It's also known as sort of data minimization. So, sort of designed to implement data protection principles is talking about sort of, instead of just patching stuff so that it's bare minimum compliant with the law, it's asking us to build these services so that they won't need the duct taping and the patching at all. And then this data minimization bit is basically if you're not going to send me something in the post, don't ask for my postal address, because you don't need it. Then a little bit about MyData. The vision behind the sort of MyData community and movement is that individuals should be in control of their own data. And we feel the GDPR is a great step in that direction. MyData goes further. I'll talk a bit more about that later. But it aims at sort of strengthening digital human rights and opening new opportunities for businesses to develop innovative personal database services built on this very key aspect of trust. Another way of saying it, it's an alternative vision and a sort of set of guiding technical principles for how me and you, we can have more control over the data trails we leave behind us in our everyday lives. So at the moment, this is kind of how personal data flows. It goes from one app developer to your employer, from the government to healthcare, and there's no clear infrastructure for how personal data flows. And if anything, the system is organization-centric. So we have these big data controllers in the middle, and this poor person there just standing in the corner. And with MyData, we believe that the better way of doing things is to put the human being in the center of the equation as a connection point between different services, and also the control point, someone who gets to say who uses their data and to what purposes. So MyData has to do with or overlaps with a bunch of different things like open data, like big data, privacy, identity management, cybersecurity. We have a lot to say for each of these different domains. So like I said, MyData is an idea that we think that the GDPR is a great step towards a MyData kind of ecosystem for personal data, but it's not enough. We often talk about formal to actionable rights and the movement that's necessary to get there. So we think that merely complying with the GDPR, while it will save you from some fines, it's not enough. You can do better. So here's one visualization of the relationship between the GDPR and MyData. There's a lot of overlap, but MyData wants to push the boundaries even further and create innovation, create new business, offer people new database services. And here's another way to look at the positioning. So back in the day, both weak data protection and not that much use of personal data. Data protection is getting stronger now with the GDPR, but it kind of tends to be perceived as having this effect of stopping services that deal with personal data because it makes it difficult to deal with personal data. And then up there with weak protection and lots of data usage, we obviously have the big guys. And MyData kind of wants to combine this strong data protection and lots of data usage, and doing it so that the individual is always in control with what happens with their data. So here's the three things that I picked up from the GDPR. Consent. MyData wants to take this further and aim for full transparency of the extent and purpose of data collected. Data portability, so guarantees basic access to certain files. What MyData wants to do is to promote realizing functional APIs and interfaces for data as well. And then data protection by design and default. The MyData idea is to design, to create, sort of to work with design principles that consider the human first, not just in terms of their data having to be protected, but also what can we offer individuals and users if they grant us access to their data. So this was a great thing that came up on TechCrunch just a day or two ago. They did a good analysis of the new terms of service consent flow and pointed out that what Facebook are doing is technically not illegal, but it very much isn't according to the spirit of the law. And this is the kind of stuff that we want to avoid. So here are a couple of examples. Idea of consent versus concealment. So you see here, you don't have I accept and I don't accept. It's accept and continue, or something cumbersome looking and grayed out that says manage data settings. And here's an even better one. Over here, there's I accept, big inviting button, and a tiny, tiny URL that says see your options. Another thing that they did had to do with granularity of consent. So the idea in the GDPR is that you can't bundle all these three different things together in one thing. This is what I was talking about when I was saying sort of give people the right to say yes to some stuff but no to other stuff. So yes, I want to use your service, so I'm going to agree to your terms, but I don't want your commercial offers. So give me the chance of doing this, right? So what Facebook did was that you could opt out of having them track you off-site. So this is off-site tracking when you're not on Facebook, but you see pages with Facebook like buttons and things like that, you're being tracked by Facebook. So what you can do now in the consent flow is to opt out of that data being used by advertisers. What you're not allowed to do is opt out from having that used to customize your newsfeed and the basic Facebook functionalities. Again, that doesn't seem entirely fair. And then finally, some tips for not getting featured on our asshole design. I found this particularly funny, this one. That had to do with the sort of implementation of these ideas from the GDPR. Data minimization, ask only for the info you need. This is a flashlight app who wants to access your media, phone, texts, location, contacts, and identity. All right? Not cool. Make it easy to change your mind, not just be polite. So I don't even know what's going on here. And make privacy the default. So you have these, like lots of forums have these sort of pre-tick boxes that you have to go ahead and untick if you want to preserve your privacy. But the idea is to either leave everything completely blank or then to have the default as the privacy preserving one. So what I want you to take away from all this, first, the personal data is everywhere. You can't escape it, and it's important to keep in mind that this GDPR thing and personal data, it's not just a module, a unit you can just sort of tick off, but it actually affects everything that we do. I want you to think human-centric when you're designing solutions and implementing changes that you need to do. I want you to think beyond minimum compliance. Think of sort of, since we need to change this stuff anyway because of GDPR, can we actually make something useful out of this? Can we actually better the user experience, offer a better service, or do something else that's cool? And not default to the easiest way out. That's being a good guy. It's sometimes going the extra mile to try and figure out how to do stuff well. Ask yourselves, would I trust a company who I knew did this? And last, just don't be an asshole. That's and the GDPR gives you a great chance of doing that. If you're interested in more of what MyData does, MyData, as I said, we have tech people who talk about the implementations of these different things and sort of building new services that use personal data. We have legal people who are very much involved with the GDPR and know it much better than I do. We have social scientists who talk about personal data, what it can do collectively for us as a society. And we have businesses who are active in the personal data ecosystem, and there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations going on there. You can find us mydata2018.org. You're very welcome to come and join us there. So that's what I wanted to say today. And I'm happy to answer questions if you have any. Yeah?
One question about the MyData event. It's in Finland?
Yes, it's in Helsinki.
Okay.
It's a kulttuuritalo.
Just one thing. Then the other thing which I've been now thinking more like, because you can weaponize also this aspect, even GDPR, because technically I could be a troll, privacy troll, and cause harm to my competing businesses by bombing them with privacy requests. And this is, I think, I don't know, maybe how do you feel about this, that using this as a weapon, because maybe I have a large company, I know I've handled everything.
Right.
So then we just bomb everybody and then,
all your small competitors and bury them in paperwork. Yeah. That's very much not a good guy thing to do, and you're absolutely right that it can be done. We're actually doing something, but from very different motives. A similar thing now on GDPR Day +1 on the 26th of May. We're actually going to practice hands-on how to request your data from different kind of companies. And what we want to do is we want to be there to help them to figure this stuff out. Because everyone on the 26th of May, everyone should have a process in place, but for sure, smaller companies won't necessarily know what to do. But we kind of, I don't know, how would you say? Let me ask you, like, if you were a small company and you suddenly got flooded with subject access request forms, what would be the nice way to do it?
The nice way to handle it or something?
Yeah.
I would probably then contact somebody that there's some kind of malicious activity or something, if it's really a lot. Okay. But of course, if it's just, I don't know, 2 people asking, because technically I think you can, if you have a 5-person company, you can easily take 1 person out for a few days with some requests and like details of requests and like, it's kind of whatever you would have this scammer. I'm not saying that maybe it's not a problem, but it could be. But I can see that, and yeah, for sure the GDPR is not perfect, and it does allow for this kind of thing. MyData is definitely interested in helping
helping small organizations and all organizations to put in place kind of effective ways of dealing with these, so that it doesn't take a person 2 days to answer 5 subject access requests. And definitely our sort of idea is not to, just to weaponize this stuff, for sure. Does this answer your question at all?
Yes, as in nobody knows.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what's the interesting thing on GDPR Day +1, what's going to happen, who's going to be ready and what's going to happen. Yeah.
I mean, just to comment on that, so the simple way to get ready for such requests, which people have they have the legal right to do so, is simply to make sure that there's a button on your website where you can download that data, like effectively, so you don't have to use human resources to find that data, and that's what also the privacy by design and that kind of stuff should be coming in the future services. So you go to Kesko website or verkkokauppa.com or whatever, you will always find somewhere download all my data type of buttons there, so they don't have to do anything. But yes, for the and this has been known for a couple of years, so it's not like it's a new thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But it feels like it's a lot of work to get to that point.
Yeah, everyone is scrambling with it, but it has, like you said, it's been a 2-year transition period, which is now ending. Yeah.
Just another thing which is related. Then now, for example, the tax authorities can match Bitcoin purchases or transactions with bank transfers. And because it's the tax man and it's kind of a state player, you see, so I don't know, do you think will some organizations get some kind of unofficial benefit to actually get data and access data that they shouldn't? Well, police probably, and this kind of safety things, because
yeah, it is stipulated that certain organizations like the police, for example, like they need to have access to your personal data without, like, you don't have to give consent for that. So there has to be a thing called legal basis for processing. So if you have that, but in terms of the wrong people getting their hands on your data, that's, again, there's the legal basis for processing that has to be proved that I have a legitimate reason for doing this. I don't know about the sort of how the tax office are planning on doing this, and do they have a legitimate basis? But the one thing I do know for sure, there's going to be a lot of lawsuits, lots and lots of lawsuits, and then they will kind of shape the national landscape in each country, because the GDPR is highly, well, not highly, but it does leave room for national differences as well. So stuff that's happening in Finland won't happen exactly the same way in Sweden, for example. And these sort of national practices will be defined largely in the courts, I think. Anyone else?
Question.
Sure.
What is MyData's main channels for this kind of activism? Are you like lobbyists basically, or just awareness? Or?
We're a combination of those things. Like I said, we are activists in the sense that we want to see a fairer digital society for everyone. We're also business people who want to make money from personal data, but doing it in an ethical way. We're also government organizations who want to streamline and optimize their data usage. And we're social scientists who are just curious about this stuff. So what we do, like I said, we meet every year here in Helsinki. We have a big Slack space that we use. It's free for anyone to join if you're interested. mydata.org/Slack. There we have these conversations. And we organize smaller meetups. I was recently in Turin for the global community meetup there. So there's lots of activity across, especially across Europe. But also there's a few hundred people gathering in May in Japan, for example, for MyData Japan. That's how we operate at the moment, and we're progressing towards a sort of global NGO establishment at the moment.
I wonder if you could tell a few words about the hubs around the world.
Yeah, so we are also a network of MyData hubs with very different profiles. Here in Finland we have a MyData Alliance. We meet once every couple of weeks. That's basically, we work a lot on technical standards and this idea of interoperability and how these different projects, like Sitra has this big IHAN project that's just starting out. There are also other projects that are working on kind of technical solutions for identity management and consent management. And what happens in the Alliance meetings is much discussion about how to kind of harmonize these and how not to have 15 different projects doing basically the same thing, but in very different ways. And then we have hubs in Barcelona where they do a lot of awareness raising, in Turin where I was just now, where they're building like a community space for developers and designers and creative people to come together and work on my data related projects to kind of like offer this space for them. And then London, we have lots of business people in Britain, lots of startups active in the personal data domain.
I wonder if you could give an example of a MyData service that you envision happening.
MyData service. So a MyData service could be a data vault, for example, somewhere local where you have where you can store all this data that you've downloaded from Twitter and from Facebook and whatever, and have that vault connect then to your bank, to your sort of airline, to your health services provider, and sort of so that you would have this one place where you have all of your data, and where you can sort of very sort of easily just click yes to my healthcare provider, but no to Google on certain bits of data. So that's the kind of MyData operator model that we've been playing, that has been sort of kicking around for a long time now. Anyone else? If not, I will thank you very much for your time.